Anna and I were sitting reading together, and there were times where we were like sitting on the couch where like at one point I was ahead and another point she was ahead, and I audibly gasped. And Anna was like, "What?" I'm like, "Just wait till you get to this page."
Welcome to the Book Angle, where we talk about books from different angles and sometimes go in circles. I'm Anna, and this is Sabrina, and we are back in my office today. If you hear any sounds of heavy breathing, it is my dog.
Pinto and I were just playing fetch for like a really long time, and she just had to lay down afterward, and she was like, "Okay, we can go again." I'm like, "I think we're done."
Yeah, she's currently on the floor with her leg up in the air waiting for somebody to give her belly rubs. But obviously we're doing this instead because we're terrible. I'm a terrible pet parent. Speaking of weird noises, we read a spooky book today.
It like really surprised me.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
So we're talking about A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. And that book, both of us went into not knowing a ton about.
Yeah, it was actually a book that Anna bought me on one of our bookshop exchanges because I think it had been recommended to you and you had seen it a lot on TikTok. I knew nothing about it. I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I knew that it was kind of dark academia, fantasy light, and that was about it, besides the fact that I know Ava Reid as a, well, I don't know her personally. I know her work. And
Ava Reid, we need to know you personally.
And I really enjoyed her, The Wolf and the, oh man, what, Wolf and the Huntsman? The Wolf and... It's on my shelf behind this.
The Wolf and the Woodsman.
The Wolf and the Woodsman, which was a really good book. That's one of her adult fantasies. This is her debut young adult. Mm-hmm. So I was really curious to see how her writing changed for this slightly different genre.
I feel like this would be a good book, for, young adults. But I also feel like a lot of people who enjoy adult fantasy, except I don't know if I would classify it as fantasy. There were fantastical elements, but it was almost like a mystery thriller. So it was a combined genre between those two.
Yeah, it's set in a world that is not our world. However, it felt very much like we were in Wales. I think that is where she drew inspiration, was Welsh mythology. Not knowing a ton about that, I believe that is where she got this from. But very familiar setting where they have cars, they have TVs, they have phones. Yeah. But maybe 1950s era of like, there's everybody's kind of dressed in tweed. Yes. So there's a lot of references to that.
You have to go to a phone booth in order to make a phone call. So very, I don't know. And they also use typewriters.
Yeah. So and I will say, before we get any further into our discussion of this book, check trigger warnings for this one, or content warnings. Mm-hmm. There is heavy themes that come up throughout this, and there's nothing that was like super graphic. Yeah. But it was discussion of things that had happened in the past to the main character.
Yeah. And I think that it was done very tactfully. Yeah. It seemed respectful of its situation, so it wasn't glorifying something. No. It was just dark and kind of heavy, but it was still good.
Yeah, and I do feel like the trauma that would come from a situation that she experienced was very believable. Yeah. And we didn't just skip over how that would affect her.
The person.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So,
with that being said,
characterization.
Yeah. I feel like I need to preface this. I don't know if this book was genuinely enjoyable to read, but I almost feel like, without trying to be biased, because we have our 5-category rubric that we follow, I have just read 2 books that I did not like very much, and then I read this book, and I'm like, oh, I love this! Yay! I'm having so much fun! And so, I would almost give it a 5, because I thought that everyone really was well developed, and because of this mystery thriller fantasy vibe, there are characters who you don't know a lot about at first, and so I feel like, but but you learn about them later because you're learning more about their backstory as they're like unveiling what the main mystery and idea of the story is.
Yeah.
And because that was always obvious, I always knew that we were going to get this information in small chunks.
Yeah.
I didn't feel a disconnect from any of the characters. I thought they were well developed. I liked them. And even the people you're not supposed to like, I really didn't like them either. So it was really well done, in my opinion. I would give it a 5, I think.
Yeah, I actually agree with you on that, because the characters in this book are so well developed, even the side characters. Yes. And I think that is something that we've noticed in previous books that we've discussed, is that maybe the main characters are really well developed, but then the side characters don't live up to the standard. Yeah. And this felt like every single character that we interact with had the right vibes. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but like they, even if I didn't fully know what their deal was, I was intrigued by them. I believed that they were shady, or that they were good, or that their motivations made sense, all of that. And it was just really well developed to the where these people felt very real. Yeah. Despite the fact that a lot of the things that are going on are kind of whack.
Yeah. And I think that that's probably what made it, I mean, it definitely has fantastical elements. Don't mishear me. But that's what made it feel like it wasn't a fantasy realm. I just felt like, oh yeah, this is how I would act in this situation. This is totally how you're supposed to respond. Or the person that they're supposed to meet who is kind of a jerk is a jerk. And it makes sense. So it was just really, I liked the characters a lot.
Yeah. Okay. So plot. How did you feel about the plot development?
See, I don't actually think it's because I've just read 2 bad books. I genuinely enjoyed this.
This was genuinely a good book.
It just really was. Like, I almost, like, I mean, we'll get there soon, but general reading experience, very positive. I thought that the plot made sense. Mm-hmm. We had a very clear goal that the character is supposed to go on, and if you don't know anything about it, they're going to build someone a house. Right. That's like the main goal. And so you get to see them going to the house and learning more about the house. And I thought that it made sense. There were certain hints that were revealed along the way where I was able to guess a good portion of the ending, but that didn't ruin the experience for me because it was well done. All of the little eggs that we had throughout just made sense. Yeah.
There was enough towards the end where you kind of were like, okay, I think this is what's happening. Mm-hmm. And when everything is revealed, and I felt like it was revealed in a pretty well done manner, you're like, okay, so that I was right here, and here's the little bit of extra that I couldn't quite get because it was so like lightly handed to you that you were never able to like fully make the connection of what was happening. However, it wasn't like a complete blindside plot twist where you're like, where did that come from? It just felt like a very natural conclusion. Yeah. And I really appreciated that. I will also say that I really appreciated how she weaves in the mythology of this world that plays a really big part in the plot. Yes. So the main character is going to the house of her favorite author who was passed away 6 months ago. And basically, while she is there, interacting with a scholar who was of her school, and he is trying to prove that the author was a fraud. And this is her favorite writer, who has written a lot of works that play a really large role in their history. Yeah. And she weaves in, she being Ava Reid, the author of this book, weaves in enough of the stories of the writer that we can guess, like figure out what kind of writer he was, and also like kind of understand what they're discussing without it being like, I feel like I need to read another text just to understand the major plot point here of like the context of his work. And so I felt that was done well.
I also think that she did a really good job of showing skeptics versus believers in a lot of ways because of this mythology. And sometimes that's a theme that is portrayed in books, but I don't I don't buy it. It's like, okay. But this one I thought was handled really well, especially by one of the other main characters, because he's trying to prove the main character wrong. Just the logic made sense, and especially if you consider where he's from and the types of things that he believed in and bought into. I just felt like their dynamic was really well done.
Yeah.
So, are we saying 5 for plot?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think so. Wow, we're on a roll.
Okay, so next is author's voice. How did you feel about that?
I mean, I don't want to say it was... So there were definitely stylistic things that were done really well, even just the way that every single chapter is set up. And if you pick up the book and read it, that'll make sense. And I feel like that was a really good stylistic choice. I thought that the prose was really believable. We have awesome descriptions of where the story's taking place, both of the towns that they visit, where they're from, where they're headed, what everything looks like, what some of the mythology looks like.
Yeah.
I really just believed the tone also was consistent all throughout. I mean, it probably would be a 5. The only thing that I will say, but I don't know what in the world she could have done differently, is I don't know, without reading any of her other books, I wouldn't know if I'd be able to be like, that's Ava Reid. Whereas for some other authors, they do insert themselves a little bit more, where I can always pick them apart. But having never read any of other books, I don't know if I can say that honestly. You know?
Yeah.
So maybe a 4, just because it's not like very distinct, but I'd be fine with a 5 too.
Okay. I think what made it a 5 for me is that a lot of this book takes place in a very wet environment, and you get that sense of being damp. That was what kind of like her tone of not tone of voice, but like really her tone of voice, like the words she chose kind of invoked this feeling of being in the dark and it being musty and moldy, and you're like constantly wet and cold, and there's like this creeping sensation that you're being watched. That vibe came through so clearly. I feel like that really like upped the spookiness of certain moments. And that is why it's a 5 for me, is like that's kind of hard to make me physically feel like I'm a little bit damp and cold.
Yeah, you convinced me. It's a 5.
It's a 5.
I mean, it's just one of those things, because when I think of author's voice, I always think I can pick them up every time I read them.
Yeah.
But we also have to think about author's voice with how they describe things and the prose that they use, and she did do that really, really well. Yeah. So if this was a debut novel, I wouldn't be able to compare it to anything else, so I'm just going to give it a 5.
Cool. 5. All right. So we're going 5 so far. Believability.
I believed it.
Yeah.
Anna and I were sitting reading together, and there were times where we were like sitting on the couch where like at one point I was ahead and another point she was ahead, and I audibly gasped. And Anna was like, what? I'm like, just wait till you get to this page. And there was just all of these moments where I started my nails don't look great. They never look that great because I make pottery, but I was biting them so hard, just waiting to see what was going to happen. And I also kept on thinking, it wasn't necessarily like scary, but it was spooky, but I was getting scary movie vibes. I'm like, is someone going to pop up in front of me? Like, you know, you look at a window, turn, look back, and there's a person there.
Yeah.
That was almost the gut feeling I had while reading. I really believed it. It was a 5.
Yeah, there's 2 things I want to add to that. Also 5 for me, but there's 2 things I want to add. First, this is a romance, and the romantic plot was very believable. It was not an insta-love. It's more of a rivals to lovers. If you are familiar with Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, this book is like a sister book to that in my head. Very similar vibes between the 2 love interests. Not a similar plot, however, kind of dark academia, and they're like both from the same school, and I won't say more than that, but if you like Divine Rivals, I would highly suggest this book. Second thing I would like to note is there were a couple of moments where you're reading and you're like, what is going on with this character? What are they doing?
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, this doesn't make any sense. And then at the end, you get the explanation for what's going on, and you're like, oh.
And it literally all makes sense.
It all comes together in that moment of being like, that explains what happened 150 pages ago. And I was like, what in the world?
Yeah.
I get it now. And that was very satisfying.
And something else I'm going to say, if you're someone who's like, gosh, do I have to study my book in order to remember things at the end? That it's not actually like this, because it was very distinct in your head. That was an odd moment.
Right.
So if you're someone who doesn't want to heavily analyze every line of your book to figure out plot points, then this is still a really good book for you. Because I know for me in the past, sometimes I haven't liked thrillers because I'm like, is this important? Is this important? Is this important? I knew what was important. Right. And I knew what to pay attention to. So, and I bring that up because I had told Anna, I don't actually think I would have picked up this book for myself, especially after having read it all, because just on paper, if you were to hear about it, it just wouldn't be the book that would stand out to me. But I'm so glad I read it. And I'm also glad for that particular aspect of I know what I'm looking for and what to pay attention to, and I am enjoying the finger biting experience.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of experience, our last category is general reading experience.
What do y'all think it was? Let me know.
I think that we probably both landed on a 5.
Yeah.
Highly recommend.
Yeah.
And it definitely, again, I will repeat, divine rivals in this book. Very similar, so maybe that should be...
maybe I need to read it.
Maybe you need to read that one. Add it to your list.
This queue is getting long.
I will say the world is far more developed for this one than it is in Divine Rivals.
Okay.
Divine Rivals, interesting plot. World is very underdeveloped in my opinion, and that's where it kind of fell for me. But this one, the world is really well done as well. This was like what... I don't want to be like, this one's better, but it could have been, but it kind of is. So this, we just really like this one.
Yeah.
So, and it's hard to talk about a book sometimes when you have nothing negative to say about it. When you're like, this is just great.
Yeah, I understand why people enjoyed it so much. A 5 is I would recommend this book to everyone. The only thing I wouldn't have, if you hadn't just said that it was a romance, I probably wouldn't have classified it as a romance.
That's true.
So if you are a hardcore romance person, you should still read this book, but I don't want you to feel like that is the forefront of this novel. It's definitely in there, and it's believable, and you're happy that it's happening, but it's not maybe like other romance fantasy books that you might be picking up. But that shouldn't deter you from it. But I also don't want you to be disappointed thinking this is a romance plot, what's happening, because it's still good. Like, it's still a good, believable romance. It just might not be exactly what you were expecting, because for me, the mystery plot was the main focus.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's a subplot. But it's because it was so well done.
Who cares?
Yeah.
I just could see someone out there leaving their Goodreads review without using our rubric and just be like, this is a 1 because it's not a romance. And it's like, no. So I want to let you know in advance, but I would recommend this. I actually have a few people I'll probably text today to recommend this book too.
Yeah, I got no notes. Like that's it for me. Like this was a very solid 5. Yeah. Which was really great. It was really nice.
It was really nice. See, we do give out 5s, guys. We do.
We've been pretty harsh on some of our previous reads. This one it hit the mark for both of us. So
yeah, we've read it really fast.
Yeah.
So definitely check it out. Let us know if you like it. What would you rate it? Did you see the ending coming too? I don't know what other questions you have about it.
Yeah. It was just good.
It just was. Yeah. Loved it. Great recommendation. Give us more of your book recommendations. We were actually talking about that at the coffee shop. We're so thankful for everyone who has been giving us these book recommendations, and this was a good one. So let us know in the chat. That's a question I really want answered. Yeah. I want your recommendations, and if you have read this book, give me more like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Like and subscribe.
Bye.